let's see, what should we talk about? And why specifically, besides thinking about the Pulse massacre, which obviously inspired you to do a lot of intense activism, why do you think today, queer and trans people should maybe learn about guns? Specifically.
Well, we'll go with the easy answer first. Yeah. Because you have a right to. Because you should always choose education over ignorance. Because there are people who don't want you to do it.
I agree. Yeah.
And
it's those opportunists again, but it isn't an economic opportunity. It's a opportunity to hurt other people. Bigotry. Yeah.
And I do feel, and this is where I get a little hand on heart patriotic, that it is very patriotic, because remember, our nation was founded by a bunch of people who said, no, Britain, we're not going to let you do things.
Yeah.
We're not going to let you confiscate our firearms and our powder.
Right.
And
as they did in some European countries, and is Australia also like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Because you were talking about Australia rebuilding a gun culture.
Well, there are people there who are trying to.
Okay.
It's very difficult.
Okay.
They are very restrictive there. And so I feel that it is very American.
Okay.
And so people like to bring up, well, the Second Amendment was devised so that you could fight the government. And okay, be that as it may, the point of the Second Amendment, really, as far as I'm concerned, is don't trust the government to have your best interests in heart.
Right.
Because they don't.
Right.
They have the government's best interests at heart.
And also, even if they do, let's say like the agents of the government, police officers and that sort of thing, they always show up after the fact.
Yes.
After the hurt has happened, after whatever has happened, that's all they can do is show up after the fact. I've even had police tell me that, because I had a stalker once a long time ago, and they said, well, unless he's hurt you, you can't show up, because that person also has rights, even though, there were things that he was doing that I couldn't really prove. Yeah.
One of the things, I keep saying that, but it's true. One of the things I like to say is that you are your own first responder.
Yes.
Because the police can take 15 minutes or more to show up.
Right.
In which time horrible things can happen to you. A few years back, there was a shooting in Virginia Beach. And the police station was literally down the street a few blocks. It was about as best case scenario as you could get. It took them, 20, 30 minutes to respond and neutralize the shooters.
Yeah.
Because someone has to call 911. 911 has to report it. They have to get in touch with the police. The police have to physically get there.
Yeah. And then they have to plan what they're going to do once they're on scene. Yeah.
Yeah. The police, unfortunately, they aren't security on Star Trek.
Yeah.
They can't transport in and save you right then.
Right.
The only guarantee...
No time travel either.
No. The only guarantee in any disaster involving you is that you are going to be the first responder.
Yeah.
And so you need to be able to deal with it.
Right.
I'm going to reach off screen here for a minute.
Okay.
It's completely relevant.
Okay.
Aha! Here we go.
Okay.
I have a tourniquet.
Oh. Wow. That doesn't look like a tourniquet.
Oh, it is.
It is.
Trust me. I have a tourniquet.
I'm thinking of MASH or something.
Oh. Tourniquet technology has evolved quite a long way since then. So, this is to stop traumatic bleeding.
Oh, okay.
This does not make me a paramedic. It is just another tool I have in my toolbox.
Yes.
So that I can hopefully mitigate circumstances while waiting for the professionals to arrive.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll save someone's life. Maybe mine.
Yeah.
Maybe a family member's.
Yeah.
Might even be a bystander.
Yeah.
But the point is, I have it so that I can hopefully save a life.
Yeah.
It
And
doesn't.
that's really responsible as a gun owner too, Because if you do shoot someone, it's not necessarily like you want to kill them. You know, maybe you just wounded them or something
You
like that.
just want the threat to go away.
You want the threat to go away. And that's really compassionate that you would have a tourniquet with you to possibly save that person's life. Yeah.
And so I draw the parallel. Okay, I've got this life-saving tool. It doesn't mean I'm a paramedic. It's just a tool in my toolbox.
Yeah. Just like a first aid kit.
I have a pistol.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm a police officer. It's just another tool in my toolbox that I can use to protect myself until the professionals arrive.
Right. And I love that. I love the humility in that too. You know, there's, you know, it's some people think that if you get a gun that you have some big ego or something and you're going to, you know, wave it around and look at me, I'm so tough. But there's some humility in that, and I love that.
The more you know about guns, the less you want to shoot someone.
Right.
And I'm sure for people who are just getting into that, there's a certain amount of that John Wayne feeling, and it goes away very quickly.
Yeah.
Because,
well, you got to clean that gun, too, if you shoot it a lot at the range, you know.
those of us who have paid attention to the self-defense shootings, and I'm not going to get into the politics.
Yes.
But the two big names of George Zimmerman and Kyle Rittenhouse, look at how much hell these people went through.
Yes, yes. Kyle Rittenhouse, I mean, he like passed out even, I believe. He, you know, during his trial.
I didn't watch it.
Yeah, he kind of fell down at a couple of points. Yeah.
My point being is once you realize just how much it's going to affect, let's be frank, ruin your life.
Yes.
If you have to shoot another person in self-defense, no matter how completely justified you may be, the more you go, I really don't want to.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of psychology involved in studying people who have shot people. And I would suggest you... Massad Ayoob has written a lot.
How do you spell the last name?
Ayoob.
Okay.
It's Lebanese.
Okay.
And, you know, he is a gentleman who's been teaching police officers how to shoot since like the 70s or the 80s. He's very prolific. He's very well read and very well written. Okay. And, you know, he's written about it as well as other people. And there are some universal things that happen when you have to shoot someone. And there's guilt. There's what's known as the Mark of Cain syndrome, where you believe that you're cursed and, you know, everyone is hating you and judging you. And there's just so much psychological trauma that affects you, not just in here, but it affects your body and it affects you socially.
Right.
Because
most people are not sociopaths.
Yes,
like
fortunately.
Like the vast majority of all of us are not sociopathic. So we do have feelings about, you know, our actions, consequences, you know. And
so, yeah, the more you study what's involved in these self-defense shootings, the more you go, oh, I really don't want to. Look, if I have to defend myself and I can do it without shooting someone, if it means they go away, you know, okay, so I'm pointing my gun. I'm saying, don't come any closer.
Yeah.
And they run away, great.
Yeah, that's a win.
I'm not victimized.
Yep.
You know, I haven't had to shoot anyone. Okay, the bad guy isn't caught, but you know what? That's not my job.
Yeah.
That's the job of the police. I can give them a report.
I bet he'd think twice, though.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I suppose, best case scenario, I hold him there for the police to show up, and he's arrested. Great. The very last thing I want to do is to shoot him. Don't get me wrong, I will if I have to.
That's right.
Because if you're going to carry a gun for self-defense, the worst thing you can do is not have the will to use it.
Yeah.
Because that's how we get the... It's not so much a myth, it's greatly over-exaggerated, but it is possible for you to be overpowered and lose your weapon. And it comes primarily from you not having the will to use it until it's too late.
Like too much hesitation.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to do it.
That's where trading comes in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you need if you're going to carry a gun for self-defense, you need training, you need confidence that you can operate it, confidence that you can hit what you're aiming at, but you also need confidence that when it comes to it, you can defend yourself with lethal force if necessary. Mm-hmm. And that's why, circling back, that's why Blazing Sword doesn't try to push gun ownership on people.
Yeah.
Because if you believe that you can't do it,
yeah.
well, who are we to say otherwise?
Right.
You know you, and we're not going to make that very important decision.
That's right. And there's other things that you can do, too. You can take self-defense classes. You can take martial arts. There's all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was wondering, you mentioned also the Pink Pistols. Is there some crossover with that group? Can you tell us about that group?
I sure can.
Yeah.
So the Pink Pistols actually predates Operation Blazing Sword.
Okay.
It was founded 22 years ago. Interestingly enough, it was theorized before it was created. So there is a gentleman known as Jonathan Rauch, R-A-U-C-H.
Okay.
I'm horrible with names. I can never remember to look it up. But he was writing for a magazine. I think it was Slate. It might be Salon.
Okay.
As I said before, I'm terrible with names. It's
Sure.
one of those
very popular magazines.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so in the year 2000, he was talking about, gay bashing and the increasing violence towards queer people. And he said, Mr. Rauch said, we need this organization of gay gun owners to normalize gun ownership by gay people. I believe he was a gay man, and so that was his emphasis.
Where was he based out of?
I don't know.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I want to say Washington, D.C., but I could just be...
Okay. Well, we can look that up.
Yes, we can.
Everybody can look that up.
Homework. But...
you are a teacher.
So the Pink Pistols, he theorized, would normalize gun ownership, and it would give homophobes pause. Again, the herd immunity. And they would think, well, maybe I don't want to hit them because they might be carrying a gun.
Was this in the 90s?
No, this was literally the year 2000.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so
because in the 90s there were all kinds of anti-gay referendums.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if he's the one who came up with the slogan, armed gays don't get bashed. If not, it was the person who founded the Pink Pistols. And that would be Douglas Crick, a.k.a. Cricket, who read that article and said, that's a great idea. We should do that. And so he created the Pink Pistols. And the Pink Pistols...
That's interesting. I didn't realize that it was gay men who did that, because I've always noticed, I haven't been really involved, that it's always been women, whether that's cisgendered or trans women, who've been the most active that I've seen. But maybe that's just where I've been living.
When did you start paying attention to this?
Maybe like 10 years ago or something. I've had a strange life, so I kind of go in and out of popular culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree that there has been a growth. Really, in the past 10 years, there's been a very explosive growth of women in firearms, not just in ownership, but in activism and in making female-centric firearms and firearm accessories.
Yeah.
For the longest time...
I'm also thinking of the DC Project, which is a lobbying group. Yeah.
I'm familiar with them. For the longest time, for example, the way to advertise to women in order to get them to buy a gun would be shrink it and pink it.
Sure, right.
But not every woman goes for that. And so for the past 10 years or so, we've seen a lot of manufacturers going, well, let's actually find out what women want.
Yes. And
so anything that includes women is, by and large, going to involve trans women as well.
Right.
So
as it should. And girls as well.
Yes.
Like any kind of girl. When I was living in Alaska, actually, you mentioned shrink it and pink it. There were very small, long guns that were pink that were on sale at gun stores for little girls. because the gun culture in Alaska is very strong, of course. Yeah. For good reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
But to get back to your question, I mean, I wasn't really aware of gun culture at that time. I was still pretty young and had my head up my butt in a lot of ways.
Okay.
But as far as I know, I do believe it was founded primarily by gay men, because this was the era of Matthew Shepard and a lot of the violence, because, well, bluntly, society likes lesbians a hell of a lot more than it likes gay men. And the gay panic defense, like you mentioned,
some might say that lesbians were just ignored in preference to gay men.
Well,
but that's a deeper community conversation.
What I was getting at was that lesbianism is considered sexier by straight men, whereas straight men perceive gay men as threats sometimes.
But in reality, though, the reality of lesbians is usually not what cisgendered straight men are looking for.
Oh, I know.
Yes.
Whatever you got, I can get twice as long in plastic. I'm not interested.
That's right.
Right. So that's how it started.
Yeah.
And while Blazing Sword was and is education and outreach, Pink Pistols has been about community and sustainment. And so it's more about, we are going to create a club, an organization, a safe space where you can come in and you can learn about guns, you can talk about guns, we can shoot guns.
Is it only LGBT?
Well, it's open to anyone.
Okay. All right.
You don't have to be queer. All you have to do is say, I'm a Pink Pistol.
Okay.
And you can join. Okay. Now, if you make people uncomfortable, you'll be asked to leave the chapter.
Yeah.
But it is not a queers only club.
Okay.
And
I was thinking, just contrasting it with the Blazing Swords, which is kind of cis and trans and straight and queer. It's kind of a mix.
I want to muddy all that up. I want it to be big tent and inclusive.
Okay.
I really dislike the term ally. And I know why it's used, but I
say more about that.
I will. I was just gathering my thoughts. Okay. While I understand the premise behind it, that, okay, you haven't lived it, but you're sympathetic, so that makes you an ally, but, you're not exactly one of us. While I understand that in principle, and it has its use, when we're talking about an organization that is for support, I feel that making it for queers only relegates allies to second-class citizen status. And honestly, queer people, we are such a small percentage of this big nation that we cannot afford to alienate people. And so
allyship, that's an unnecessary boundary.
In a lot of ways, yes. Okay. And within Pink Pistols.
Yeah. Everybody comes to the party.
Yes.
Why not?
Yes.
Why not?
I mean, it's none of my business who you sleep with or what you have between your legs. And so if that doesn't matter to me and it doesn't matter to the functioning of the organization, it shouldn't matter at all. So as long as you support the goal of the Pink Pistols, which is we are going to teach and support queer people in their gun ownership and then tell other people that it has been done, then you're a Pink Pistol. And there's no ally about it.
Does, speaking of bigger communities outside of LGBT spaces or communities, space is such a weird word to use, I must say. I rarely use it, but I don't know why I just did. Anyway, does Blazing Swords or Pink Pistols, do you guys do any lobbying? Or is this all about skill sharing, basically?
We do not do any lobbying because we are a 501c3. Lobbying is a 501c4 organization. And I have to be very careful what I say. Now, I can complain about laws and politicians all I like. And that's fine. And I will do that.
Yes.
But we have to be very careful not to be seen endorsing certain candidates. Now, there are some laws, some regulations, which I believe we can say this is good, we support it. But due to an overabundance of caution, I am very careful about what I say. And so I take pains not to endorse, as a figurehead or speaking for the organizations, any political candidate or political party.
Yeah. That must be tough for you, I would think.
Well, it's tough only in that people ask me questions and I have to explain, I'm sorry, I'm really not comfortable. But, oh goodness.
Especially since you basically head up a couple of guns rights organizations and with a whole bunch of queer and trans people. Like, I would assume that you have people coming at you from every direction wanting to kind of, trip you up or something. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why I don't want to be a 501c4, because that's when you get into the political blood sports. And I'm too busy doing what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And my concern, this is a concern I've had since day one, and it's still a concern 7 years later, or 6 or whatever. Math is hard. Is that the people who need to hear our message the most are the ones who are likely not to hear it. Because, as mentioned before, communities are insular and they tend to close ranks. And there is this unfortunate perception within large parts of the gay community. And you were talking about community before. We're about as organized.
And allies of it too.
But I mean, the queer community is basically an Olympic-sized tub full of cats.
Yes. Yes.
That's the amount of organization we have.
Yeah, I agree. It's so many communities,
And unfortunately, within that, gun ownership is looked down upon. And so if you are queer and you own a gun, it's almost like being outed as gay in the 70s and 80s. There's a lot of naming, shaming, and blaming.
Yes.
It's, why would you want that? Does this mean you're going to shoot people? Do you want to kill people? Do you want to kill yourself?
Are you a Republican?
Yes, exactly.
Nothing wrong with being a Republican, by the way. Just, assumptions are made.
And so this is why a lot of people want to stay in the gun cabinet. And so the people who I think really need to hear the message of Operation Blazing Sword and get that education so that they aren't operating from ignorance, they're the ones who aren't hearing it.
Right.
And I would very much like to get the message deep into, this is not a correct term, but I can't think of a better one.
Sure.
The queer enclaves, deep into San Francisco, deep into New York.
Or like the LGBT centers. I have a little bit of issue with them because I feel like they hire lobbyists to do specific kind of work that should benefit the entire community, or they should at least think about the entire community. But they only have a particular, sometimes narrow agenda that has to do with their own kind of activism. And it almost becomes like LGBT community, in quotes, policy. And unfortunately, lawmakers and funders will sometimes listen to them instead of taking a broader view.
So a year after Blazing Sword was created, and this took a lot of work, a lot of effort, I was able to have a seminar in Orlando, and it was essentially run, hide, fight. And so it wasn't about, here's how you draw your gun and you shoot the assailant. It was about surviving a mass shooting. And there was an emphasis on first aid, and there was an emphasis on hiding. And so the only thing that involved guns was the fact that pink pistols and blazing sword, we are a firearms, a pro-gun organization, was involved.
Okay.
And
I can feel something coming here.
Oh, yes. And so I tried to reach out to the various, maybe there was only one, I don't remember. Anyway, I tried to reach out to the Orlando Queer Organization, and they wouldn't return my phone call.
Wow.
And honestly, that's continued. I get the cold shoulder from most of these organizations.
Amazing.
And I had secured a venue, and it was with a particular church. And things had progressed, to a preliminary standpoint to where, okay, we've got the time and the location. Now let's talk about how much we're going to pay you.
Yeah.
And then apparently, because I don't truly know what happened, but it sounded like first we were talking with, say, the business manager or the church secretary, but then the church council found out about it.
No.
Oh, and then an emergency meeting was called. And it came down to guns are bad, okay? And so we've decided we're not going to let you have your meeting here.
How can self-defense become politicized? I mean, not even just guns. It sounds like you guys were just doing like a self-defense class that so many colleges give. I mean, colleges give those kind of courses.
Because we had guns in the name.
Okay.
And
you're the bad people.
Yes.
Because you want people to defend themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, this can get back to a question you asked and we never fully answered.
Yeah.
What kind of pushback I get.
Yes,
and I get it from both sides.
I'm wondering about that.
So it's very different depending on whether it's from the right or the left.
Oh, by the way, did they allow you to have your event?
We had to go to a different place, but we held it at a Jewish community center. And hey,
awesome.
The Jewish people are A-okay with protecting themselves with firearms, even though we didn't teach anything about firearms. So yes, I was able to have it after a lot of idiocy.
Great. Okay. Now back to the friction part.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the left has a problem with me, they almost always look at me as some sort of traitor. I am not an authentic whatever.
Wow.
And I am...
When people bring out authentic, you know that there's some problems there.
Yeah. And, how dare I basically... guns are used to queer people. Guns are used to murder queer people. So how can you even think that this is good in order to have a gun? And they're basically saying, well, guns are used to murder. So anyone who has a gun is a murderer, and you're bad. And
can I ask you something? Have you ever gotten anti-queer or anti-trans comments from LGBT people because of that?
I haven't. No.
Okay.
No.
Because, I've noticed that online, this may be just an online phenomenon, that if people are, let's say, libertarian or Republican or conservative, and they happen to be also queer and trans, they don't really have to say anything. They can just identify that way, and people will start attacking their identity. They will say things like say the worst kind of things that the worst kind of bigot would say. For instance, Caitlyn Jenner is a very obviously polarizing character for many people, for good reason too. She's doing her thing. She's working at Fox as a pundit. But I noticed online that people in an FTM group that I was in were calling her masculine, that she had male privilege, And I pointed out that is, the same kind of thing that a TERF would say. And they just didn't understand that because they did not like this person and what they were doing. So I guess I was just curious if it had gone that far. Maybe not.
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I've gotten terrible comments, but they have, to my knowledge, not been by other queer people.
So mostly issue based, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I mean, other than the usual YouTube trolls who, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I should kill myself, that sort of thing. But thank you. But to finish my thought, the left will regard me the way a vampire regards a crucifix, and
just distance.
Well, actually, they'll block me.
Block you?
Yes, they'll block me. They'll unperson me. And on the one hand, I mean, I like the fact that I know
shun you from spaces, or
yes,
I mean, okay,
yes,
like you're not welcome in queer and trans spaces.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, or I'm kicked out. I'm blocked.
Wow.
Unfriended. Things like that. And well, on one hand, I mean, I can appreciate the purity of purpose. I know exactly where I stand with them. This does cut off further communication, and nothing else can be learned.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame for both sides.
Right.
We aren't learning from each other.
Yeah.
The right is different. The right will not block me. The right will argue with me and tell me how wrong I am.
Yeah.
And will want to debate everything. And there are times I think they're trying to get me angry enough to where I block them, and they call it a win.
And what would they be arguing with you about?
Take your pick.
Okay.
I mean, they're almost always pro-gun.
Yeah.
But okay.
Identity and sexuality. That's
okay. I'm transgender.
Yeah.
So I'm insane.
Okay.
And so crazy people shouldn't have guns.
Okay.
Or, well, I shouldn't be teaching queer people how to use guns because they are all leftists and we're arming the enemy.
I see. Okay.
And so in the inevitable...
We're not all just Americans. There's like enemy lines.
Yeah, and so in the inevitable civil war that's going to happen, I'm arming and training the enemy and things like that. And so on the upside... communication is always happening. On the downside, there reaches that point where it's just not worth it anymore.
Yes. You get tired of that communication, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So each side is different, and each side has its good and its bad, but they're both very frustrating.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I find that queer and trans communities can be very cutting. Like that's kind of the what I'm thinking about it, like severing relationships, like that's it. When, that has happened to a lot of queer and trans people. So maybe we should know better to treat each other with a little humanity, you know? Yeah. It's pretty awful. Yeah.
So let me wrap up because I think we're getting close to time.
Yeah. I really appreciate you, by the way. The last couple of guests I've had have been very much like you, who are very expert in what they do. So it makes my job so much easier. And I just feel like I'm just kind of like listening in. I'm learning here.
Thank you so much.
I'm not an interviewer, like whatever, So I really appreciate you. And, also just the position that you're taking, like we've been talking about, as being kind of this person that people pivot off of for thinking about what they're doing in their lives and how they're preparing themselves or how they relate to other people who are very different. You're juggling a lot of personalities and, a lot. You're doing a lot there.
Well, thank you. I feel like I'm not accomplishing nearly enough. Everyone else tells me I'm too hard on myself, but I feel like I haven't done enough.
Also take a break. There's also this thing in activist communities where people push, and then they
burn out.
Yeah, they burn out. They start doing bad activism. They start getting angry with people in ways that are, not healthy and not going to accomplish anything. But I don't see you doing that. But, just keep it in mind.
I take lots of breaks.
Yeah, good.
Fortunately, I don't have to do everything by myself.
Yeah. Organizations, right?
Yes.
You delegate out?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, good.
I've got a wonderful board of directors. I've got a lot of great admins and moderators on social media.
That's so healthy because that also grows other people in terms of their activism. Yeah.
And so Pink Pistols, we got a little bit off track. So that was in 2000. And now we've got roughly 55 or so chapters across the country. Yeah. It's not as widespread as Blazing Sword, but the difference again, Blazing Sword is about education and getting you there. Once you have decided that guns are right for you, ideally, you will then join or create a Pink Pistols chapter so that you can continue to perpetuate that atmosphere of pro-2A, pro-queer inclusion and education.
Yeah. Now I understand, because I was wondering what the relationship is. So Blazing Swords is more like the introduction and the basic education. And then if you actually want to become a gun owner and be a part of a gun club, where you shoot and you have camaraderie and you learn more, that would be Pink Pistols.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's my hope that someone who starts off being gun curious and gets the education, decides to become a gun owner, will then join or create a Pink Pistols chapter and then can become a Blazing Sword volunteer instructor themselves and perpetuate the cycle.
Yeah. So what's on the docket for what the Pink Pistols or Blazing Swords is doing these days?
Well, first of all, we are now one organization.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It was founded in 2000, but in 2018, the first speaker, Gwen Patton, stepped down. And I was a Pink Pistol before I started Blazing Sword.
Okay.
And she was making noises about she needed to retire for health reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And so I actually had her join the board of directors for Blazing Sword and oversee its integration.
Okay.
And so in 2018, Pink Pistols integrated into Operation Blazing Sword. So I run both of them because they are basically the same.
Okay.
It's sort of like the way the Marines are a department of the Navy.
Sure. Yeah.
So if, say, a Pink Pistols chapter needs money to go to Pride and they can't raise that money, well, Blazing Sword is a 501c3 and we can have a charity fundraiser, which is tax deductible.
That's great.
And then I can earmark that money for them to go to Pride or to hold a concealed carry class or whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's how I worked to make that happen for so long. And I feel like we still haven't gotten firing on all cylinders.
And also it sounds like you can work across like the urban-rural divide as well, because, sometimes rural places have less resources and sometimes less safety around these issues. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So now I can raise funds on a national level.
Yeah,
just
you
to
can
help
hit
various
those
chapters.
big donors.
Yeah, well,
keep writing those letters.
That's something I'm still working on. I still haven't yet figured out really how to approach a corporate donor and say, "Give me money."
Yeah,
it's a
hard one.
Well, I do that because I have the courage, and then they say, "Well, what's in it for us?" And then I go, "I don't know." I mean, a good feeling, a tax write-off, you're growing your customer base, and apparently that's not enough. Yeah. I don't know. So if you're watching this and you know about, being a marketing director, please contact me. Blazing Sword really needs your help.
Yeah, and grant writers.
Yes.
Yeah. That's it's the reason why those are fields of, professions is because they are difficult jobs.
And, well, we're a charity, so we don't have a whole lot of money. And so there are all sorts of organizations that have offered to help, and the price they've quoted me, it's like, this will bankrupt us. Goodness. So, finding one that'll do it for little or no money is difficult.
Or put in a few hours, few volunteer hours every week, why not? Or every month, whatever,
But to answer your question, what we have on the docket.
On the docket, what's in the future here?
So there's something that's very exciting, and I think by the time this airs, it will have been ruled upon, because the Supreme Court is pondering it right now. We aren't a litigant, but Pink Pistols filed an amicus curiae brief, friend of the court.
Wow.
Oh, we've done this a bunch of times. We file amicus briefs for decades. And in fact, one of the Washington, D.C. rulings, Wren versus D.C., is properly Wren and Pink Pistols versus D.C. So that was, I believe, the only one where we were actually filed as plaintiffs. But we file as amicus for a lot of these things, because when you are trying to get a case in front of a judge, whether it is a district judge, a circuit judge, a Supreme Court judge, the more varied the responses, the more likely they are to read it. Because, it's a gun law. You're going to expect all the pro-gun people to be for it and all the anti-gun people to oppose it. Yawn.
How does that work with being a nonprofit?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean. How does that work?
In terms of it not being lobbying.
Well, it's not lobbying because this is not about trying to get someone to pass a law. This is going through the courts.
Okay. Sorry, I'm ignorant of legal system procedures.
No, I'm pretty ignorant myself. But if the judge sees that there's been this broad coalition, in the previous one, I don't remember the name, but Pink Pistols was a joint filing with the National African American Gun Owner Association, and
that's also grown in the last couple years.
And I believe it was a Jewish fire. I don't know. The point being, there was a whole bunch of different people, and it was sort of the whole and here's the rainbow coalition amicus brief. And a judge, when they see that, oh, well, this is interesting. I didn't expect that. If nothing else, they will be curious and they will read. And so we frequently file for that purpose. Now, admittedly, it has to be something that we believe in. We're not going to just file any old thing. But the one that's currently being decided right now, and I don't know when they're going to reach their decision, but the SCOTUS session is going to close pretty soon for the summer. It's something called NYSRPA versus Bruen. That's the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. And Bruen is the current superintendent of the state police for the state of New York. And there's a lot to go into on that. But here's the very, very short version. The states, actually, every single state is either may issue or shall issue, or I suppose constitutional carry, which is definitely shall issue. But here's the difference between may and shall. So you fill out your form, I would like to have a concealed carry permit, and you give it to the government. Now, in a shall issue state, the law states, unless you can give a definite reason why you shouldn't, for example, this person is a convicted felon. This person has a history of physical abuse or whatever.
Suicide attempts, something like that.
I'm actually not sure if that's in there. But the point being, unless this person checks one or more boxes of these specifically delineated reasons why they can't have it, then you shall issue them their permit.
I see.
So, unless you can specifically disqualify them, you're going to give it to them.
Sure.
May issue.
So it sides with the rights.
Yes. May issue, on the other hand, is very, very soft and squishy.
Sounds like it.
And it says that you fill out the form, and the state may issue it to you.
Sounds like that sheriff office thing.
Yeah. It may or it may not, depending on how it feels. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. And so that's how you can have states like Hawaii, which technically have concealed carry permits, but do not allow private citizens.
Sure. No, so nobody has them, really.
Well, I mean, police officers and
professionals.
Probably...
like security or something.
That's not what I was thinking of, but yes, private investigators.
Okay, yeah.
But licensed individuals who need it for their job. But just your average citizen cannot get a concealed carry permit because they are may issue. New York State is also may issue. And
so it's almost like people have rights.
Yes. And so New York State Rifle and Pistol Association is suing the superintendent of police because the state police are the ones who decide whether or not they're going to issue that. And they are basically saying, you are not issuing this fairly.
Yeah. Yeah.
For these reasons. And so we are going to sue you because we want you to give these permits out fairly.
Yeah.
And this has the implication, the possibility of turning New York from may issue to shall issue. And if that happens, then all of the other states which are may issue are suddenly vulnerable to lawsuit. Because
that's amazing.
Because we've got precedent, and precedent is this magical thing to the courts,
and in New York too.
Yeah, you know, if it happened once, then there's a really good chance it can happen again.
Yeah,
and I was very involved in the creation of this amicus brief. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't write it. I'm completely blanking on the name of the company. The law firm that wrote it for me. I'm sorry, I wish I could name drop them. But I was put in touch with them by the Second Amendment Foundation, who are run by my friends, the Gottliebs. They're fantastic people. And
yeah, name drop all you want.
Thank you. And so they put me in touch with this law firm who did it all for free.
Wow.
Well, it was free to me. I don't know if SAF paid them or if it was a tax write-off or what.
Sure.
And I was in contact with the lawyers who wrote that brief. And I said, look, I'm not going to tell you how you do your job. I've never written an amicus brief before, but here's some ideas.
Yeah.
Here are some points that I think you could make.
Right. As a layperson, how do you translate this into legal language?
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of them was, I'm so proud of this, because I feel like it had the real possibility to put New York politicians into a Morton's fork, which is, which one of these two bad decisions do you want to choose?
Sure.
And
it's
so,
like that meme where you press one button or the other.
Yes. Exactly. And so I pointed them towards this increase in violence against queer people that has been ramping up.
Really?
Yes.
I haven't looked at the statistics. Where do you find statistics like that?
Poof, gone.
Poof. Okay. Sorry, I know it's difficult to sometimes pull things up like that.
It's an acronym, national something or other. As soon as we get done, and I'm driving home, I know I'll remember it. I'll get it to you. But yeah, they specifically track violence against queer people.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, well, we've got rising violence against queer people. And I know that New York, specifically New York City, prides itself on being not just tolerant, but open and accepting towards queer people.
Yeah.
But they are specifically making it difficult for queer people to defend themselves.
Right.
So you maybe want to phrase this in such a way that you have to ask New York, well, which is more important? Protecting the lives of your queer voters, in which case you have to let them have guns, or deciding that gun control is more important and send the message that their lives aren't as important as your precious gun control.
Right. Right.
And the lawyers saw that and said, oh, this is fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I try to bring this up. I try to highlight this a lot, that whenever we're taking away people's rights, it's always the most vulnerable that are hit with that first. Always. Free speech. If you curtail free speech, guess who's going to be curtailed first? It's going to be people like you and me. You know, the troublemakers, the queer people, the trans people. We got to fight for our rights. All of them.
And this is why I say that gun rights are queer rights.
Yeah.
And I've got a multi-part breakdown, which I haven't committed to memory. I'll make sure that you get it.
I know that's a T-shirt somewhere. That must be.
I don't know that it is, but it ought to be.
It should be.
But the very short version of it is that guns in queer hands defend queer lives.
Yeah.
You know, queer lives are worth defending.
Yeah.
And if you are killed by people who want to visit violence on you, you know, you don't have a queer life anymore.
Right.
You need to be able to defend it, and you need to be able to defend it efficiently.
Let's not be martyrs, people. Let's be alive.
Yes. And so gun ownership is pro-queer because it protects queer lives.
Right.
And therefore, if it protects queer lives, gun rights are queer rights.
That's right. That's right. I'm totally there with you. And I think that's a good place to end this.
I agree.
Yeah. We've been talking for a while here, and I'll tell you what, I love these conversations, but it really does take a bit out of me. I hope that you're okay. And
I've had a bit more practice.
Yes, yeah, probably. I'm sure you're the head of a couple of important organizations. Anyways, thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure, Shane.
You're so busy. I really appreciate it. So,
well, the message needs to get out.
Yeah.
And if this documentary just reaches one person who decides, maybe I should investigate armed self-defense, then it's worth it.
Yeah. And, you know, that's who I'm trying to highlight in this series is voices that aren't often heard, you know, points of view, opinions, and I you know, so far it's been really fun. And even though I don't always agree with my guests, I agree very, very well with you. It's still fun for me. I think that I think I've had some really thoughtful conversations so far. So,
great.
Yeah. And I've really enjoyed today.
Well, thanks. You. I've enjoyed it too.
Yeah. Maybe I'll become a pink pistol.
You should.
Yeah. Once I settle down somewhere after this trip. Yeah. I had to actually sell my guns. Yeah. When I left Alaska.
All of them?
Yeah. And I sold a bunch of my ammo. Basically because I didn't want to deal with transfer because I had to go over the Canadian border. Yeah. And to get my guns back from here, from a lower 48 state, I would have to establish residency in a particular state and have an ID and then go through more of the red tape in order to get them back from whatever store I had transferred them to. So I was like, this is nonsense. So I sold them. A very nice neighbor bought them at my cost, and you know, I gave him a good deal on a bunch of ammo too. So it was a good trade.
Well, all right. They went to a good home.
Yeah, and it actually funded my trip down here. So that's okay. That's okay. I still have some ammo left. You know, every once in a while I'll stop into a Cabela's or, you know, whatever and check out the candy store. So anyway, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah.